Very lovely. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Economies, Residents and Community Scrutiny Committee. It's Monday, the 30th of January, and I'm Councillor Angela Davis, your chair for this meeting. So we've got quite a hefty agenda here today, so we're going to work through it without further ado. So item 1, are there any apologies for today's meeting? I believe you've had some, Rachel.
Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillor Tom Colbert, Councillor Pete Lewington, Vice Chair of Finance Panel, and Officers Nigel Bryn and Paul Bradshaw.
Thank you very much. And second, any disclosures of interest. But I'm going to assume here that there must be an exception because this is quite a strategic document and we're going to be looking at all functions of the council. But as we're all council taxpayers and council service users, I'm assuming, are we covered there?
It's only, Chair, if the any of the particular proposals affected anybody individually, your families, etc. But if you come across something as you're going along, just declare an interest or seek my advice in the background.
Lovely, thank you for that, Wyn. Okay, any declarations of party whip? Okay, we'll take silence to mean no. Please put your hand up if you want to catch my attention on anything. So the main agenda item for this meeting is the draft 2023-2024 budget, and we're going to scrutinise this budget in relation to the Cabinet's budget proposals, and we have a whole pack of documents ahead of us. I believe, Jane, that you're going to introduce this for us. So Jane Thomas, Head of Finance and our Section 151 Officer. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm only going to give a very brief overview. You've got an extensive pack of documents that sets out all of the detail. So as means to that overview, the report that Cabinet considered on the 17th of January, which is the one that you're scrutinising today, set out the Council's draft medium-term financial strategy, its financial resource model for the period 23 to 28, and that included the draft budget for next financial year 23-24 and a draft capital programme for the 5 years from 23-24 as well. I think it's just worth commenting that the Council has developed these plans in what is an extremely challenging economic context. We've seen high level of inflation that is impacting on many of the costs across the council, and that falls on the back of the pandemic, and of course we're still, as many organisations, recovering from that. So it has been quite a challenging period in which to actually develop a budget proposal. The report does go on then to start to look into the medium term, and I think we feel that with inflation still as high as it is, although projected to fall, we are still, for some years going to be in this context of higher prices. And it is in that context that we've looked to develop these plans. We're also getting some information through, when we think of the Chancellor's autumn spending plans, there looks like there could be a further hit on public services and the financing of those in a few years' time. So again, it's bearing that in mind as we've developed these plans to ensure that the council can remain financially stable and provide those sustainable services in the longer term. The report, as I said, gives a lot of detail. Section 3 of the report sets out the provisional local government settlement for us as a local authority. It also highlights some of the areas that Welsh Government have committed to and included within that settlement. So those are set out for you there, together with some additional information in terms of what Welsh Government proposed to do for businesses and other ratepayers. And some support packages that will still be there in place for some of those non-domestic rates as well. Overall, it shows that Powys had an increase of 8.7% in its funding from Welsh Government last year, and that was £18.298 million in terms of cash terms. A reasonable settlement, and I think in any other year we would be more than grateful for an 8.7% increase. But when you put that in the context of the current inflation levels that we're seeing, then effectively that is a real terms cut in terms of our available funding. There's further information then around the capital settlement. Very little change from a capital perspective in terms of our funding. And we do expect to have the final settlement confirmed on the 7th of March when Welsh Government do consider their final budget. Although we're not expecting too many changes, we have been made aware of one change in terms of some potential grant funding coming through with regard to the fire service, that we will then have to pass on to the fire service through our budget as well, but that is considered as part of the budget plan. The report then goes on to give you more detail. We look at the budgets that have been pulled together for all of the services across the council, and that is shown in table 5 on page 16 of the report. That shows each of the service areas and the proposed level of funding that each would be allocated under this proposal for the 23-24 financial year. And then later in that section, it starts to talk about the significant pressures falling on the council over that period of just under £25 million worth of increased costs. Those are set out there. And again, you have the detail of that around the services that you're looking at specifically today as part of those detailed papers, that you see each of those pressures identified. And then we go on to propose a number of reductions in terms of helping us manage those pressures, together with the additional funding we receive, a 5% increase in council tax, which is proposed, and then significant reductions of around 16 million also proposed. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. I think you have had an awful lot of documentation to work through with impact assessments for every proposal that you're seeing. So I will leave it there, Chair, but happy to pick up any questions as we proceed through the meeting.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jane. So I think we'll go on now to each, as I say, department by department. So we're starting with property planning and public protection. And we have Councillor Jake Berryman here, our cabinet holder for a Connected Powys, Councillor Jackie Charlton, our cabinet holder for a Greener Powys, Councillor Richard Church here for a Safer Powys, and our leader, Councillor Gibson-Watt, is going to be joining us a little bit later on. And we've got Gwilym Davis, who's head of property planning and public protection. So welcome to you all. Thank you. I think, Gwilym, did you want to lead us through this?
Yes, if it's okay, I'm just going to share my screen.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Hopefully people will be able to see.
Yeah, we can see that. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take you through the list of savings first before going on to pressures. I have tried to group them to service areas within my service area, so you can look at the cumulative impact. The first saving proposal is from the planning service. And that's budget line reduction from the other services budget line, which is the budget that pays for consultants, such as, for example, Clwyd Paris Archaeological Trust to give advice on archaeology, biodiversity services. It also pays for things such as legal advice, external legal advice, when the planning service requires guidance in relation to judicial reviews, for example. That budget overall is 44,000, and what we're looking to do is reduce that by 9,400. We believe that with a reduction on the number of poultry units, hopefully, touch wood, there wouldn't be the requirement for the legal expenditure. Also, from a minerals perspective, we have seen a number of minerals applications going through, so we will not be required, hopefully, to use as many consultants. Therefore, we believe that this can be delivered and at relatively low risk. The next item in relation to the planning service is the training budget reduction. This is a budget of 10,000 overall, and we're proposing a reduction of 5,400 from that budget. Now, the planning service normally uses this budget to pay for planners to go to university to undertake the appropriate training to get become a chartered planner. However, given the COVID environment, what we've had is planners haven't actually developed or haven't secured a relevant training from more experienced staff within the service area. So the training is going to take a form of a different approach, with staff being asked to come to the offices to aid their development, and also using the specialists within the council to provide bespoke training. For example, the Built Heritage Officer undertaking training on built heritage, CADU providing built heritage training to across the board. We've had ecology training, those kind of, and planning highways, environmental health training. That's the kind of training that the planners require now after a period of 3 years away from the office from COVID. So we believe that training budget, the risk can be managed to acceptable level by alternative forms of training. From a staff travel perspective, we got a budget of 14,500, and we're looking to reduce that by 5,000. That's based on trends, recent trends. Now, trends do alter. I accept that, but we're looking with area officers and also grouping applications to keep that reduction down. So we believe that we can secure £5,000 from that and still be within budget. But as I said, it's a trend, so trends do alter. The next one comes to the strategic property team, and that's energy efficiency measures for our offices. Late last year, we reduced the temperatures of our offices down to 19 degrees, and currently we are seeing some very positive results in the amount of money we actually are spending on our offices, and we believe that we can secure that £26,000, and we'll be monitoring that very closely, and hopefully we can even actually exceed it, especially given some of the measures such as LED lighting that we are introducing to our offices, which is assisting in us securing that total. So currently we are on target to secure that money. The reduction in energy management budget, this is a £10,000 budget that we utilise to undertake some survey works and secure internal advice on best approaches to energy in our buildings, especially if we're doing a building project. This is a reduction of, say, of half, 50% of that budget, but we believe that there are some grants available to help us undertake that, and I'll see the council's working with schools as well as community councils to undertake some of that work now, which has been grant funded by the Welsh government. So we've got alternative sources there to hopefully reduce the impact on that one. In relation to maintenance, we got maintenance budgets of around 227,000 in for offices and 128,000 for depots. We are looking to reduce those budgets by 128. Now that will have an impact on our ability to maintain our buildings, and this has to be closely monitored to ensure that those impacts are understood and reviewed where necessary. It could, in the worst case scenario, result in buildings deteriorating, and rather than repair, you'd have to replace, which could potentially result in increased costs. But it is one that we need to just closely monitor. The next one is staff budget reductions in strategic property. We have got a number of vacant posts or people are leaving the strategic property team, so it's unlikely to result in compulsory redundancies, but you are talking about a reduction in a workforce there for strategic property, who are now leading on a number of key statutory compliance projects, commercial projects, disposals, maintenance. So it will have an adverse impact upon that, but it is something that we'll need to be monitoring again very closely, looking at the risks associated with that, but also managing expectations. if we haven't got the capacity to undertake certain projects, then we'll have to learn to say no to certain areas. So we'll have to make sure that we understand the opportunity costs of those decisions. With regards to the next property savings proposals is cleaning frequency in our offices. We're looking still to undertake the high risk elements, the toilets, the kitchens, things like that on a regular basis, but we will not be undertaking cleaning on the same frequency as we currently do. We'll reduce it to the bare minimum required for health and safety grounds. This will unfortunately likely to lead to redundancies, but we're looking to working with our cleaning colleagues to see how we can best address those issues. Next one is in relation to rental income from the park office. At the moment, we're looking to co-locate or relocate resources or staff resources to Ladywell House, which is an excellent facility and provides fit for purpose provisions for residents and staff alike. But this will lead to potentially the park office being available for partner organisations in line with Powys, and also potentially for as part of the North Powys Wellbeing Hub to rent elements of that building, reducing our costs and also securing a rental income. So we believe we can secure £47,000. That is a part year saving because we do not believe we can do it immediately, but we're looking to secure that 47, and then the following year to secure another 47,000 income from that building. The next one is cost recovery in relation to undertaking statutory compliance and remedial work, as well as delivering fire risk assessments. As part of corporate landlord, we are undertaking those works, but we're looking now to claim back some of those costs associated with undertaking that work. The following with £15,000 is from increased income from our commercial estate. This is from undertaking reviews of existing fee arrangements. This is part of a normal management of our commercial estate, and we believe that £15,000 should be secured we're confident that £15,000 can be secured and minimal impacts. Now we're moving on to public protection. We've got the staffing budget reduction for environmental health commercial. The commercial team are the team that undertake infectious disease investigations, food hygiene investigations and inspections, and do health and safety as well as do public health work. So there is, when you read through the impact assessment there, given the nature of the work they do, there is obviously a risk associated with that. Currently, there are 4 vacancies within our team, and we've hopefully recruited to 2 of those vacant posts. So the team is increasing, but we have had issues with recruitment to that team. So that redundancy will be, or that post will be a vacant post being removed. So there won't be a compulsory redundancy, but it is an area which needs close review, especially given that it's a statutory element, and we have got regulators there that will be monitoring those statutory requirements. The next requirement one is a reduction in the staffing budgets of the closed landfills and contaminated land service area. This again is likely to result in a contaminated land officer being lost from the service area. This is a service area that deals with contaminated land for planning applications, for example, with developers providing advice for planning applications and remedial works after. It also manages our closed landfill sites, and we've got 17 of them throughout Powys, making sure that the conditions are appropriate and managing the risk for those sites. So losing one officer does result in an element of risk there, but we are looking to offset that risk by using existing environmental health provision to broaden their expertise to try to offset some of the impacts there. The following one is increased burial fees by 10%. This is again does have impacts. There is a potential, and it is a potential for increased public health burials as people struggle to afford to pay for the burials, as well as the other associated costs which aren't council related. It's likely to secure an income of £42,000. There is a potential for residents to go to other locations, and there are locations within Paris or across the border, and that is something that we need to monitor closely. The next one is bill control, £54,000. This is likely to result in equivalent to a surveyor, which would put increased workload on the remaining surveyors, and the resilience there for issues such as dangerous structures, demolition notices, our ability to respond to them in a timely manner. And last one from savings proposals is the increased income 10% across the board for those that we are able to increase, and that's £58,000. That also includes £10,000 management fee for myself for the state agency team that Powis runs. So that altogether is 776,000. Chair, do you wish me to go to the pressures first before?
Well, shall we just check with the committee if anybody has any questions at that stage? I will say, Gwilym, thank you very much. You know, huge amount of work there, 16 lines in the budget paper, and an impact report for every one of those. And I will say it was a very thorough write-up of those and the impacts, but I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions for you. So would you prefer to take some now, or would you?
The only thing that potentially could help is that there's some planning and impacts on the pressures as well, potentially for people to be aware of.
Okay,
Chair, okay, so if
we'll stay with you for now then, Gwilym.
Sorry, it would be very quick now. It's only 5 on this one. Planning has seen an income reduction over this year, mainly associated with poultry sheds. We've seen a huge reduction in number of poultry sheds, and they were the applications that did attract significant fees. We've also had phosphates impacting on residential developments, especially big developments. So overall, we've seen our income drop, and this is again, it's another trend, and each month does change, but 420,000, that's relating to the income deficit there that we're putting, and also the previous savings proposal that we haven't been able to deliver as well. So overall, those two add up to 420 pressure for that service area that we don't believe that we can secure based on current trends. Now, those trends could change when phosphates are resolved, etc. But at the moment, that's what we're predicting. The other element, the environmental health commercial team, which is proposing a saving, but it's also had a pressure granted, or we're looking for a pressure as well. And that's of 69,000. We've undertaken a job evaluation of those roles in environmental health commercial, and that has come out as increased grades. Now, that's based upon additional responsibilities that they've taken on over COVID and have inherited, unfortunately, over the COVID time period. So that has put a pressure of £69,000 onto that service area. The remaining two is the proceeds of crime. Previous savings proposal, we've removed the proceeds of crime investigator. But also we've taken a different direction as a trading standards team. We're now looking at more local investigations, those which really matter for the communities. Not saying that we didn't do that previously, but moving away from the larger investigations. And we're also changing resource to go into food standards, where we need to step up in order to meet our statutory requirements. So we don't believe that we can secure that £44,000 income stream from proceeds of crimes. Then the last one is actually a reduction in local development plan teams expenditure of 137,000. That is where this financial year, we've got a number of evidence items being developed and commissioned, but following year, next financial year, we would not require that evidence to be produced, so therefore we don't need as much budget. So hence why it's minus 137. So that's everything, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwilym. That's, as I say, that's quite a substantial amount of work that you've put in there to deliver that for us. So if we go back to, I think you're still sharing your screen. That's lovely. So back to the committee now. Any questions? I'm hoping there'll be lots of questions based on that. Arwell, you're the first to put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gwilym, for the presentation. I think every sort of heading you sort of mentioned, I think the council are at massive risk. Just to highlight a few, really, the environmental health officer, okay, it is presently a vacant seat, but obviously the proposed reduction will result in the council continuing to fail to comply with the statutory requirements. That'll lead us open to like the Food Standards Agency, Health and Safety Executive, Public Health Wales, and the Welsh Government. So I think we can be penny wise and pound foolish at the end of the day. Another one there, like the landfills officer saving the 54,940, says on the impact assessment that we need to consult with the unions by the 31st of January and do a staff consultation by the 31st. Have they been done presently? Because 31st is tomorrow, really. Well, I could go on, really, but the building control officer, okay, there's a saving there of 54,000 or 55,000, but I think the existing officers are struggling to cope with the current sort of workload, really. And I honestly feel that at the end of the day, in another 12 months' time, a lot of our existing staff, which have weathered the storm so far, that they're not going to sort of keep on with it. They're just going to walk, and we'll be in a worse position, really. So there are a few questions and comments, really, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arwell. So Gwilym, would you like to respond? There were 3 key points there, I think.
In relation to the 4Ps area, there's always going to be the statutory element of whether we can comply with the codes of practice. Every single area of mine has got a statutory side.
Yeah, totally.
So there is that risk. We will manage or attempt to manage that risk if the savings are taken. And that is by looking, for example, you used the example of environmental health commercial. We'll try to ensure that the high risk properties are undertaken, but it will result in likely that the lower risk properties might not be visited in the frequency required. But it will also help if we can recruit, which it will. The recruitment of the vacant posts will help, but that said, at a full capacity previously, we were struggling to meet with the full code. Yeah. The landfill post, there has been consultation with affected officers. There's currently a vacant post within the environmental health team, and we're looking to potentially move one officer into that position in order to keep that result, that expertise within the service areas, but there still will be a loss of one full-time equivalent officer, which will impact again. With regard to building control, yeah, workloads will be high. They are high. It is one of those ones that we have to balance the risk against all the other savings proposals as well that the council has to consider.
I can see that Councillor Jake has put his hand up. Did you want to come in at that point, Jake?
Yeah, I was just going to make a reference to the final point with building control, but I mean more generally, you can see the pressures that the service is under there with the loss of fee income, which as Gwilym has alluded to, results from less large development proposals, but principally those IPUs that actually many members would rather see less of, but of course they have high fees. So we've got a very severe fee drop that we've had, and an ongoing £75,000 additionality that is effectively being set aside, because if you're imagining here that we have £750,000 of savings across the 3 Ps, look how much worse it would have been if we hadn't have made adjustments in respect of those pressures. You were talking about £1.25 million. There are no easy decisions here. I agree with everything you're saying there. And I think you know and understand that. In terms of those officers in building control being put upon, of course, that could be said about any officer in any role across the council. And what we try and do, because their role is split between commercial building control work, and they are in competition with external providers there. So we have to provide a competitive service. And actually we do reward officers appropriately and provide them with training and seek to provide a good working environment here in Powys, so that we don't just keep stretching their goodwill. And the service manager there obviously would be making cuts, any cuts in service with reluctance, but he's doing it incredibly professionally in the dialogue I've had with him, and planning how that service can continue to be delivered at the highest standard. And of course, here, I know we're losing a person, but because it is split, by keeping those that we have remaining and looking after them, we continue to provide, if you like, for the services that aren't going to pay for themselves, that Gwilym has alluded to, the dangerous structures and so forth, that otherwise we'd be paying for entirely as a council, rather than having a small degree of sharing those costs through the expertise of existing staff. So all of these are regrettable. I completely agree. We're just trying to manage them as best we possibly can, but I do thank you for your observations.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Gwilym.
Thank you both. I can see that Richard Church has put his hand up. Did you want to come in on that point, Richard?
Well, very, very briefly, I think Jake's covered a lot of it, but in relation to the environmental health commercial division, that the loss of one full-time post there, I think it's important to bear in mind that we've been operating below capacity within environmental health over the last year due to the difficulties of recruitment, and if we are able to fill the vacancies, even with the removal of this one vacancy, we will actually we will have more staff able to do more work than we've had over this past year, and we're able to do that partly by the re-evaluation that Gwilym referred to earlier. So I expect that if we can fill the vacancies that we currently have available, and it looks likely that we will, then we will be able to offer a better service than we have over the last year.
Thank you for that, Richard. That's a point well made there. Councillor Gary, would you like to come in next?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got perhaps 3 points, but first, yeah, thanks, Gwilym. I think really detailed sort of budget information there. You can clearly see work's gone on behind the scenes. My first question was around the projected income from the Park Office in Newtown. I'm just, I guess, questioning, challenging the current rental market out there for corporate buildings. The reason I assume that you've got space in Ladywell House is because that sort of idea projection a couple of years ago when it was taken on hasn't quite worked out, and there's capacity in there. And I just wonder if any ground truthing testing has been done on, is there really a tenant waiting to pay that? You hinted to the wellbeing team. Is that partly where that figure's come from? So that's point number one. The other one around EHO, I sort of agree with all of the points and comments being made from sort of Cabinet and from Arwell actually, but I wonder, are we seeing a case of a good line manager writing a good risk assessment to try and protect their workforce? It was a very detailed risk assessment with some very strong wording in there. And my question was, are these risk assessments written by different heads, if you like, different sort of managers, or have you taken on that responsibility? Because there's definitely a different style of wording, and that one did come across quite heavy, punchy, and I can understand why. So that's just one. And the other one was just on the 2-degree reduction you mentioned in sort of heating. There's a reasonable target figure in there, isn't there, across the portfolio estate? But is that, are you suggesting there's a reduction from 18 to 16 across our portfolio, and does or doesn't that include schools, or is just that our sort of corporate buildings? Because 16 is a bit of a concern if that's what we're talking about going down to. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Willem, over to you, I think.
In relation to the park office, in relation to it's, although the income would be great, it's actually removing the costs of running the building that actually would provide the biggest contribution. Paying the rates, maintenance costs, compliance costs, utility costs. If we can secure a tenant there, then that would be equivalent to £65,000. If we could provide that, and then we're envisaging then income on top of that, which I won't specify here, but was within the impact assessments. We are in negotiations with a number of parties about that building, and we are hopeful that we can actually secure a partner organisation to move into that building. But I really can't in this forum go any further than that, but it always remains a risk until you've got someone who's signed a contract with you. That is always going to remain a risk, but and hence why we've stated about only taking part of the next year's income, 45,000 rather than the £95,000, which we believe we can secure from that building. Impact assessments, it's actually they're both. I ask the service managers to undertake the impact assessments. Generally, well, they are better placed than myself to understand the risks associated with the impact assessments, and then what I do is I will get involved then and challenge those impact assessments where required, obviously in dialogue with the portfolio holders as well. And normally we will come then to an agreed impact assessments between myself and the managers to push to take forward to people such as yourself and portfolio holders and cabinet ultimately, and council. So there's a bit of both there. And sorry, I can't read my writing on the last one.
The last one was just about the potential budget or degree reduction savings at energy efficiency. You talked about setting buildings at 18 at the moment, and there's a good hefty savings line in the overall budget for heating reduction, if you like, using a single term. Can you just explain, is that a drop from 18 to 16 we're looking?
No, it's a drop down from 21 to 19 degrees. And also contributing to that are things such as LED lighting in some of our council buildings that has helped reduce the energy costs. It is something that we're again having to monitor. We are receiving some complaints from staff stating that the buildings are too cold. But that said, we're holding firm that we believe that there is an appropriate measure to take for the climate. And we believe that £26,000 can be secured from those existing budgets.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Councillor Danny next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gwilym. It's just a question really about the maintenance. 128,000 seems a hell of a saving when you've got to take into account that reduced maintenance is never a good thing in any scenario. You've got to take into account that, I know you said you'd monitor it, but how much is it going to cost to monitor what the maintenance, or the lack of maintenance is doing, and then still nothing be achieved? And how much is it going to cost to rectify everything that's gone wrong from the lack of maintenance? It seems to me like a save a penny, spend a pound situation. Thank you.
Willem, do you want to come back on that?
Of course. With the maintenance, it is a considerable sum that we are taking from the maintenance budget, especially given the push for corporate landlord But that said, it is one of those ones that we have been, in my opinion, good at maintaining our buildings, and that does put us in a relatively strong position for the next few years. So that's where I think monitoring over the next next 6 months, 12 months, that is going to be where it is important, making sure that we do come back to the appropriate forums if we do see a significant downgrade in our buildings and maintenance costs, or capital costs potentially increasing. We need to make sure that we report that appropriately. But it is unfortunately the only measure I can put in is to ensure that we monitor and ensure that we come back with the findings regularly.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come back there, Chair?
Well, I can see Councillor Jake's got his hand up. So did you have something to add in there, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think you're spot on in terms of any reduction in maintenance has an impact, particularly over time. And therefore, this is one of those things that we believe we're in a position now to make a reduction. And when Willem is saying, look, we need to monitor this over the next 12 months, potentially, although we can see down the line budget pressures are going to increase, this might be one of those areas where we realistically come back and say, we can't squeeze the pips anymore on this. We need to intervene at a point in time to ensure that our stock doesn't get any worse. So, Councillor Dan, I think you're right there. We think we can apply a squeeze now, but we might need to loosen off, and that's what the monitoring's about. The other aspect there is, of course, we are seeking to rationalise our property holdings. So our asset strategy is in place to look at everything. That's both look at it in terms of the opportunities, but also to review things from a maintenance perspective. And the state of our property and the amount that it actually reaps us by way of income, etc., against expenditure, the benefit that it brings to communities and so forth, is all subject to an annual review. And where we can release property because it has benefits either to us or the community or to tenants, etc., then that is something we will be doing. So I think you will see a general reduction in the properties that we hold, and there's a degree of being able to reduce the maintenance budget against that. But we will definitely be reviewing constantly, and officers are in place to do that in any event.
Okay.
Right, so it's more of a reduction then because you're going to hold have less properties to maintain than the amount of maintenance.
It's both of those things. If I'm honest with you, it's both of those things. We are squeezing back on that maintenance because we believe we have a sort of one-off position to be able to do so. You are right. If we don't take the money here, we have to take the money somewhere else. We think this year we can take some money out, but I am saying to you loud and clear, we may need to put some of that back in next year or the year after, particularly if we haven't reduced the property portfolio in a way that we might be doing. So we have to keep it under constant review. We think we can take some out, but we may have to put it back in due course. I think you've spotted that, and you're absolutely right in doing so.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your detailed replies, both. Thank you.
Okay, Danny, did you have another question?
No, that's it. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Carl. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm having difficulty with my camera today, so please bear with me.
Okay.
Willem, thank you for that. Park Street offices, similar to, worries are similar to Councillor Gary's, and whether you're going to realise someone to take up that space. Have you looked at the possibility of selling off Park Street offices to a developer to develop into housing?
It is always an option for the future, but when we've undertaken a review of Park Office, we believe that we can get better return by renting out the property than selling the property, and also by retaining the property. It gives the council a lot more options going forward, especially in relation to the North Powys Wellbeing Hub. And if we lost that building to a private developer, then that might reduce those opportunities. Obviously, you can never say never, but that would also be subject to a proper review if we did look at those options going forward.
Okay, and the reduced maintenance budget for offices and depots, that's just offices and depots, it doesn't cover workshops or?
No, it is purely offices and depots.
Right, how are we getting on with the biomass boiler in County Hall? Has that been rectified, the problems there?
There are still some issues in relation to the biomass boiler at County Hall, but we are looking to resolve that matter. But we are currently looking at that matter with our maintenance team. But it's just finding that fault and fixing it is proven more difficult than we thought.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you, committee. Nobody else has got their hand up. I've just got a couple of quick questions. I'm mindful of the time, but my concern then, apart from the things already raised by the committee, is I'm still got a little bit of concern about the staff reduction in building control. And I see that as being very closely linked to increasing fees and income generation across property planning and public protection. Now, it's not that I'm against increasing fees, but if we're charging, we've got to provide that competitive service. And I wonder how competitive that service can be if a reduction in staff leads to longer delays within the planning system, because we are aware that there are issues and complaints about the planning already. That's my one question.
Don't know whether Councillor Berryman wants
Shall
to
I come back on that, Angela? Yeah.
Yes.
So building control is quite separate from planning, and you're absolutely right. We are seeing some delays in the planning service, particularly around enforcement, albeit the numbers are looking like they're moving in the right direction. We are closely monitoring our performance in planning. In building control, through the quarterly reports that we have, I can confirm that building control response times are absolutely green and on target, or very near to that. They've got some 100% targets, and they're missing by 2% or thereabout. So very, very close to that. And the whole service is under a reshaping by the direction of the government, and the team is really on board with how they reshape around their learning and development to offer really good quality services. And actually we fare very well against the competition. So looking at the stats, we're holding off the competition, albeit there are very big pressures coming up from the Ustragun, Lice Valley, Swansea, and as you might expect, coming in from the other side, from the top, from Shrewsbury, where you've got the Midlands and the South Wales pressures coming in there, but they do very well commercially. What I was trying to say there is that because the service is split in two ways. One, stuff that we can't charge for, like dangerous structures, which we have an obligation as a council to fulfill, whether or not we compete for other fee earning work. So we could decide not to compete, but we do actually quite well with that. And there's non-fee earning work. Now, obviously, taking an officer out impacts on both of those potentially, but the lead officer feels that actually we can continue to be competitive as we go forward in our, if you like, our market-facing work. But he is saying, look, you have to appreciate there is some reduced capacity and therefore response times for things like dangerous structures. But actually, looking at the stats, they've done very well for us and continue to do well. But I'd love to be expanding rather than retracting in this area. But I don't think we have to worry. I don't think the risk is that great to us overall. We would continue to provide those internal non-fee earning services. You got another question, so I'm going to shut up because time's.
Yeah, my other question hasn't been mentioned, is the increase in burial fees. And obviously this is a very emotive subject, and it's something that is going to affect us all one way or another. My concern is that I note that we're already the 4th highest charger for burials. It just feels like a an uncomfortable area to be increasing charges. And I wondered, had any research been done into the cost of a council burial, say compared to a church or chapel burial? Just really the justification for putting it up if we're already one of the dearest. Councillor Richard Church.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't answer your question in relation to comparison with church or chapel burials, but I can say that this is the first increase in burial fees that we've had since 2019. And it's an increase, as you can see, 10% by inflation. It's been picked out from all the other charges. We could have just lumped it in with all of the other charges across public protection, which are also, where they are discretionary, going up by 10%. But obviously this one has a larger income than the others, so it's been pulled out as a separate line. And I think, as I say, with it being the first increase since 2019, it's reasonable that it is an increase which is in line with inflation, so that we continue to provide a service which is cost neutral to the council, or aiming to be cost neutral to the council. And we have also tried to look at the impact of previous increases to see whether that means that we've had a loss of burials with us as a consequence. And on the figures that I've been given, there has been no evidence of that. So of course it's always a risk, and you may reach a point where there is a consequential loss to the service of burials within the council. But there's no sign of that as yet. So it seems to me to be reasonable that this year we should have an inflation increase.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you for explaining that. So my apologies there, because I took us over time there. So now we'll move on to the next section, which is highways, transport and recycling. And we have Councillor Jackie Charlton, our portfolio holder for, oh, well, you were with us before, Jackie. Apologies, I've introduced you once. But we also have with us Matt Perry, who's head of highways, transport and recycling. Hello, Matt. You've got a presentation for us.
Yeah. Is that sharing?
That's up, yeah. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. So just a brief overview, you're probably all aware of the different services within HTR, but I just thought give some context in terms of the number of services, which I know impacts on yourselves and the residents. But in terms of the finances, you'll see at the bottom, it's the £30 million revenue budget within HTR, and then approximately 20 million in capital, which is a combination of internal and external grants. So the first one I'm going to go through is pressures. And I put some commentary on the right-hand side, because I don't want to just talk at you. You can perhaps read some of that as I go through, but it'll just give some context then around some of the pressures, and I'll do the same then for the savings. So the first one then is this Newtown detrunk street lights, so adoption of the trunk lights. So that's put a pressure on us in terms of the extra energy for those lights. But you'll see on the savings slide that because we convert those to LED, that we will get a 50% reduction. So whilst it shows us pressures, lots of this is linked to the savings. So it's just getting some context around it. Home to school transport. Some of you may be aware there's been an historic budget deficit year. And it's been a year-on-year increase. As I mentioned in the commentary, we've had to retender bus contracts. There's the added pressures from the ALN. Obviously, we are looking at ways that we can reduce it. But what we're doing to mitigate this is use the bus emergency scheme. So this is a grant that's given to all authorities to help, particularly during COVID, but it's been rolled forward. to help organisations prop up the public transport sector. So 517,000 is a big chunk of money, but in context, when you think the home school budget is 11 million, and passenger transport is 5 million, so it's still a lot of money, and it's still something that John and the team need to find going forward. But what we've done for this year is use this bus emergency scheme, but no doubt it will mean that we are going to have to look at reducing services to mitigate that going forward. Similar, as I said, ALN, we've had to retender some additional routes, and we've had some additional demands. So I've lumped them together. So that's additional pressure of 175,000. Inflation on materials used in highway operations and fleet workshops. So as I've said in the commentary, this is specific to things like tarmac, salt, vehicle parts. And just to give some context, highways budget is approximately 4.6 million. So, but we have had commitment of the Trunk Road Agency, which is shown on the next slide, of income for 310,000. So whilst it looks quite grim, 342, we are had commitments off the Trunk Road that they'll increase the income to us then. And in terms of income from the Trunk Road, we just get over about 8 million. So you can see it's a hefty chunk of income that we get from the Trunk Road. Inflation on contractors using highway operations. So this is waste collection, fleet workshops, design, our design team, and our HWRCs. Again, this is a massive strain. But as I said above, this is again being offset by Trunk Road work, capital works, agency fleet workshop contracts. So that income off the trunk is welcome to reduce that. Then inflation on payments to bus operators for public transport routes. So this is again balanced off by the BES fund. And it's worth noting we get income streams, not just income from people using the buses, but we get concessionary fees, BSSG from Welsh Government. So again, that's been sort of netted off. So once we see 540, the BES funding has reduced there. It's essentially just giving us the time, because transport is such a contentious issue, and we need to make sure that we do operate an efficient service. So this, in effect, is giving us now till 24-25 to really optimize the routes. I mentioned about other inflation of 12,000, so actually general stuff around materials, waste bins and the like. The next one then is inflation on payments to bus operators for the reimbursement of concessionary fees. So we get just over £1 million a year from Welsh Government, but again, due to inflation, that's per additional 88,000. But again, you'll see on the savings that's been netted off by the additional sort of income that we've received from Welsh Government. Inflation on payments then to agency staff within waste collection and highways design consultancy. We assumed 3%, but obviously it's a lot more than that. So that's 14,550. And again, just give some context, the waste recycling budget, 12.2 million. And we bring in about 4.5 million in income for waste services. Winter maintenance standby allowance. So this is something that's ongoing with the trade unions. So this is the actual standby they get paid for waiting to be called out. So we're in negotiation with the trade unions to look at how we can perhaps increase that, because it hasn't been increased for about 5 years, and the workforce, are sort of quite keen to see that increase. But again, the Trunk Road has agreed to give us 6,700 towards any increases. The HWRC retender, so that contract, we extended the contract till 2024, but as a result, with the current contract, due to inflation again, that put an additional pressure on the contract of 363,000. So just to give again, the contract value for that is 2.6 million for the HWRCs. So we've got 5 HWRCs right through the county. Then the bottom one then is additional grade 10 posts. So this is a post and sorting some of the IT licensing out. This was flagged as a critical element of the swap audit. So essentially, we've got an AMX system. We've got some time spent on it, but not enough time to, I suppose, give you as members that assurance how much has been spent in each of the individual wards. So what's happening is being booked to sort of area codes, which it's not going to change the bottom line, but it just shows, it'll just give a bit more of a detailed breakdown of the costs in the specific areas. So that was one of the things that was flagged up that we should look into to improve, because like I said, the AMX is that system that sort of gives you as members that assurance of what's being spent within highways. So that's the pressures. If I quickly go on to the savings, because again, some of these link, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah,
so as I said, the total pressures for HTR is 2.4 million of the 30 million. And then, so then savings is 2.7 million. So, you know, there is, the savings are in effect offsetting much of the pressures within the service. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, inflation awarded above the pay and non-pay element of this will be able to be passed on to the trunk road. So we've agreed with the trunk that there'll be additional income of 310,000. I mentioned about the concessionary phase, so that's an added income of 88,000. Again, income from trunk road for 341,540. So, and similarly below 24,370. So there's a lot of work that we do for the trunk, and again, because of inflation on materials, you know, there's a commitment from them to increase their income to us. As I said on the first point, mitigation to Newtown. So this is the detrunking of the some of the roads as a result of the bypass. We've inherited the lights, and by introducing LEDs, that's given us a 50% reduction. So it's a 23,100 reduction on the energy bill. Street lighting, so this is the part night and part night dimming. So this is across the county. So this is converting the remaining 5 to 10% of the street lighting stock to LED, and that'll reduce our energy by 43,250. Route optimization and waste for waste and recycling collection. So this is a mixture of staff, fleet and fuel costs, and to save on compulsory redundancies, we have got a pool of agency staff that once we've optimized the routes, that would be the staff that we would release. But as I said, it is fleet and fuel cost there. Increase income is set on the fees register. So HTR does bring a lot of income into the authority, particularly around highways. So we've increased the fees there across the board to give us the 50,000 income. And as I mentioned, the BES or the bus emergency scheme, as is properly pronounced, is for the school transport overspend. So again, this has only given us this year to really look at what our options are to try and claw this back within the transport budget. Next one then, use of the North Powers bulking facility to transfer collected materials. So this is in relation to Abermule. We're working from there at the moment with the lorries, but due to permit conditions, we're unable to do any bulking, which as a result, we're having to pay a third-party contractor to do that bulking for us. So essentially, by being able to utilise that site, that will give us a saving of 100k for waste and recycling. The next one, similarly to BES, this is basically sweating our assets. So we pay into a depreciation pot for the vehicle replacement program every year. Bulk of it comes from HTR, but it's across the board. So what we're saying here is by taking $1 million out of that pot, again, it only gives us 1 year, but it'll give me and the team enough to look at how we make those efficiencies further in 24-25. But that £1 million essentially will mean that we'll have to prolong the use of some of the vehicles. So luckily we're in a position where lots of our vehicles are quite new. So that's why we've used it, so that perhaps in 3 or 4 years' time, then we may have to consider extending the use of those vehicles for another year or perhaps even 2 years. But again, it's just worth noting this is only a one-off. And as I mentioned, Streetworks income, Streetworks is doing extremely well. We bring in over £1 million worth of income from street works. So we've put an income target of best part of £250,000 that we're comfortable that we'll achieve then for 23-24. So that gives us then a total of 2.797 million then, Chair.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. So again, very thorough set of information there, and we've had all the impact assessments to go with those budget lines, and I can see hands going up straight away. There we are, the screen's back. So Danny.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. The trunk street lighting. I know you said you get you'll get 50% back of it by changing to LED. Is there an option to change it to like a solar battery setup to disconnect them from the grid completely to give more saving?
Yes, the team are looking at all options, anything that, and particularly where we know that there's sort of underground faults. So, where that's quite costly to replace some street lights, solar lighting for those specific areas would certainly help. So yeah, they are looking at all options really to reduce that energy bill.
Yeah, so there's a possible chance of more savings on that then?
Possibly, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Arwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I was just checking I wasn't on mute. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt, for your presentation. You mentioned the £1 million sort of obviously delay into the depreciation top pot. So obviously, is there what costs going to be involved? Because obviously I've done it myself. Sort of you've kept a vehicle, I'll keep it another 12 months. Lo and behold, the alternator goes, need a new battery, need a new starter, and you find basically that you've spent probably what you would have saved by changing earlier. You've spent it at a later date. So obviously you've got no element of what is the cost to the council going to be for the keeping of those vehicles for a further 12 months. And obviously down the line, they're 12 months older, so you need a lot more to change when you do change. And then the other one is just going on to the Abermule sort of waste site. When is that going to be up and running? Sort of, is it finally up and running, or are we still waiting for the second access to it? Or what's the position with that, please? Thank you.
Okay. If I answer your second question first, so the Abermule site, we're operating all the fleet from there. So all the Welshpool and Newtown staff now are based there every morning. But due to the permits not being finalised, we're unable to sort of drop any sort of waste and recycling off this. But it's currently with NRW. There has been some information that's come in to just for further clarification, but we are pretty much at the final end of it. But I know you're probably all aware it's been going on for a number of years, but we everything that the NRW have asked for, we've provided, and we're hopeful that we will get in there this financial year. But so as I said, the crews are there. It's just the waste element, and that's just purely down to NRW. The fleet replacement, I totally get, and that is perhaps one element of the risk. But like I said, fortunately, we have got our Rome equips, which are quite new. They were quite expensive. And as an example, I know Torvine bought some of our old Rome equips, and they're still using them. So I think they have got a bit of a shelf life on them. So perhaps we are getting rid of vehicles too quickly. And like I said, I talk about the Rome equips because other authorities have bought them off us and are using them. So perhaps in those instances, we use those vehicles to claw back that £1 million that we've sort of taken out. The other issue with fleet replacement, and something that we're going to have to consider, is if we are, which we will need to transfer over to electrification of fleet, then we really need to get a proper true cost then of replacing to those, because they're 100% more than a typical sort of diesel lorry. So for example, the RCV we got in Brecon would normally cost say 200k. That's in excess of 400,000. So just hope that those costs do drop. But I do get your point. It could potentially be brewing some issues, by keeping vehicles on longer. So that's why I was only keen to just do it for 1 year really, and not anymore.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Matt.
Okay, Councillor Adrian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt. So I'm just going to repeat the question a little bit about Abermule Balkan facility, because I'd heard that the thing that's holding it up is the odour problem that might affect the units that are just opened there. So that, in my mind, that I know how long these things can take to sort out. There might be a risk there that it doesn't get opened in the next financial year. But my second question is about the inflationary pressures on materials. And I'm not an accountant, but I don't quite understand how, for example, I believe tarmac has probably gone up about 40% in the year. Does that mean that's going to get covered and that you'll have the same amount of work to be able to do as sort of surface dressing, etc.?
Yes.
So is that going to be covered so you'll be the same work, or is it amount of budget in?
I think you're breaking up a minute there, Adrian.
Thank you.
Did you get that, Matt?
Yeah. So in terms of the inflationary increases, we are. Sorry.
Can you hear that Matt is responding to you now, Adrian? Right, I think Adrian may have a problem. If you want to carry on, Matt, so hopefully you can answer the question to the rest of us.
We, by those increases, so those pressures, then that's what we say in the service needs to sort of keep a straight line, really. So in answer to the question, if we do get those increases, then we're hopeful that we'll be able to do the same. There may be a slight reduction, but essentially that's the whole point of us putting those pressures up, was to offset those additional costs. So we still got the issue with the network. We've got the biggest network in Wales, 5,000 kilometres, 500 is trunk road. So there's always going to be a demand. And I think the added issue we've got is, the recent flooding, from flooding to cold spells, and that's put added pressure on the road network. I know the chap in the north, Clive, the area manager, was saying literally, over days, the stuff that we're reacting to. So yeah, in answer to the question, it will give us that straight line, but there is certainly more demand on the network. The Abermule issue, we've been working with RAP and our consultants, and they've done some modelling around the odour. I think there has been some challenge around that from the local community, but that you are right, that is one of the things that's been sort of looked at by NRW at the moment. But we are confident everything that we put in to mitigate against odour is sort of been put through, and our consultants are happy with it as well. So it's just a matter of waiting now for NRW to come back to us.
Thank you, Matt. Jackie, I can see you've got your hand up, but would you mind if I brought you in at the end, and perhaps, there may be a number of crossover questions that you'll be able to sort of round up together. So Councillor Anita was next.
Hello. Yes, Matt, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the school transport budget. So you mentioned that there'll be changes over this coming year, and I just wanted to know in particular about the timeline and consultation, given the issues that we recently experienced when there were changes. I don't know if you could give a little bit more on that.
Yeah, and can I take this opportunity to apologise to members on that? I've asked the team to sort of do a lessons learned on that, because whilst there was a lot of good work that was done, we did sort of fall down on some of the communication. So that exercise is essentially what we are looking to sort of improve on, and making sure that we're operating as efficiently as possible. But to put some context around it, that review has led to potentially sort of 15 buses that potentially could come off by us optimizing the routes. So we had the new QR code system that came in to show how many children were on certain buses, and it was just ridiculous in terms of the capacity. You may have 10 kids on a 50-seater, so that's where our work was done. But definitely, we need to sort of acknowledge where we didn't communicate, but that it is that type of exercise that we're going to be doing, and the routes are obviously risk assessed. But the team are going to come back to me and let me know sort of what the issues were around that. But essentially that's what we're going to have to do within transport, is that we operate as efficiently as possible and make sure the buses are maximised, really, so that there's no spare seats.
Okay, Anita. Right, next we have Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matt, for your presentation. I guess my question might be almost aimed more towards Jane and the finance team, but does it really work if we look to effectively take money out as a saving this year, but then add it straight back in for next year? And I guess I'm challenging you on the BES fund and both the depreciation fund. You've got £1.5 million there taken out, but appears back in next year's as a putting it back in. And then I'll perhaps just try and remind myself about the latest environment that HTR had over vehicle fund earlier on in the year, that we agreed as a council, or the council agreed to make a fairly significant environment in HTR monies due to vehicle replacement funds, if I'm right. So we had an asset, we're sitting on it, move it across. But I'm just questioning, does that strategy work? Are we just going to find ourselves in the same problem next year?
I'm happy to come in first, Jane, if that's all right. And that's why I was very keen to sort of emphasise that it was only a year. And really, already I'm speaking with the team to look at how we, and you're entirely right, between the BES and the depreciation pot, there's £1.5 million that I'll have to look at. Things that potentially, are not here today, but I'll have to look elsewhere within the service then around, or potentially increase income targets. But whatever way you cut it, I've got to try and find £1.5 million for 24-25, and that could either be through income generation or perhaps a reduction in services. But that I didn't want to rush into doing something like that until I've got a few months now just to work with the team to ensure I can give sort of yourselves and EMT that assurance for 24-25 that I can achieve the £1.5 million.
Okay, Gary. So Councillor Carl next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to got my camera working now. Thank you for that, Matt. The permit required from NRW in the bulking station. Where's you mentioned a third party's doing the bulking for us at the moment. Where is that taking place?
At Welshpool.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just a cost because it's another provider doing something that we should be doing ourselves. And that's where that sort of cost would go. So we are so keen to get in there for a number of reasons, but obviously now we've got a target on it. We're hoping we can get in there before April, but it is down to NRW now to sort of get it over the line.
Okay. And the bulking permit only relates to recycling products such as plastic, glass, paper.
Yeah.
So there's nothing on that permit for black bags processing.
For recycling, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So that's the end of the hands up. So I've just got a question, if that's all right. And it doesn't refer to an item in one of the impact assessments, but on page 31 of the full document, we talk about the network of public rights of way. And it mentions there the costs involved, the number of bridges that we have, and the requirement that these will need some maintenance over the next year's period. And I just wonder where they feature within the budget itself.
With the countryside services, we I haven't put any cuts for that service. So the public rights of way budget is going to remain as is. So there's quite a few schemes that we've got within sort of Sean's countryside teams. So we have internal and external funding for that. And we were fortunate as well just to gain funding for the Shared Prosperity Fund as well to ensure we bolster that, because we're mindful, again, that service has been reduced over the years, and we are keen to make sure that we got a team there that can deliver. So that's the reason why it essentially has been left. So we haven't cut that budget at all.
Yeah, because I guess if we got nearly 6,000 miles of roads, we've probably got something similar, if not more, in terms of footpaths and rights of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and difficult to maintain them all, I guess.
Yes, very challenging. Yeah.
Councillor Arwell, you've just put your hand up. I know Jackie's chomping at the bit to come in there.
No, just exactly, Chair, just what you mentioned regarding the footpaths, because we've got some footpaths in my area now that they haven't been walked for probably, well, I've been in the village for 30 years, and I haven't seen nobody walking for 30 years, and they're basically opening them all, well, they are opening them up, so they're putting kissing gates in and stiles and what have you. And I'm getting it in the ear from residents to say that the existing footpaths, they're not maintaining them, but they're opening new ones. And okay, I appreciate that for new footpaths, they're getting funding from Welsh Government. Why can't we channel some of the Welsh Government funding into the existing, the ones that are walked regularly, rather than open new ones, which at the end of the day, basically they were postman paths going back 40, 50 years ago. But I probably know the answer, but I just like a comment off Matt on that source, please.
Yes, we have got a sort of priority ranking, but I would be keen to, very much like we're doing with the highways depot meetings, to be keen to sort of go out and speak to yourselves as members on rights away countryside services, just to make sure that we are working as best as we can together on, as you said, if we invest in money into areas that perhaps as residents they would prefer other areas, then we've got to we've got to factor that in. So I'd be keen to meet within wards, and perhaps we can discuss that, because to be fair to Sian, she's brought a lot of additional income through capital funding to improve the rights of way, and so yeah, definitely be keen to share that. So we don't want to be working in isolation, so I'll take that as an action.
Yeah. Could we get sort of would Welsh Government be agreeable to fund, improving existing compared to opening existing, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can certainly look into that. I think we've got to explore all options. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Well, I mean, that's quite positive. Thank you for that, Matt. I mean, I know for myself personally, yes, it's nice to walk down a popular footpath, but the point of getting out into the outdoors is to go places you don't normally go. And I think that's why there's a desire to open up, not new, but paths that perhaps haven't been so accessible in the past, isn't there? So it's getting that balance right. Councillor Adrian, you've put your hand up. I'll give you the last question and then we must go to Jackie, because we're getting over time. And that's the one thing I said I was going to try and stick to the timetable. So Adrian,
okay, thanks. Did you say I'm back in? I got put backstage for some reason. Did Matt hear my full questions? And if he answered them, I'll get a recap after.
Yes, he did.
Right, thank you.
So Jackie, if you want to have the final word.
Thank you, Angela. Yes, yeah, I wouldn't mind a word if it's not necessarily the final word. Yes, I support Matt in the way that he's answered the questions, so I'm not going to go over that. What I would like to do is just to give the Scrutiny Committee the assurance that one area we had most trouble with is the depreciation on the vehicles, and we did start off with a figure which was over 2 million on that, and we've reduced it. And yes, I do think this is probably something that we can achieve, but we know that it is a big risk. But just to mention again as well that going forward, what we will be looking at is changing vehicles to electric vehicles, and if we change to another petrol diesel vehicle, we will be changing to an electric vehicle at some point. So I think this helps us in that progression, really, to make sure that we're not doubly changing vehicles. And that, again, we have to realise brings along with it, every new vehicle has already emitted a lot of carbon emissions. So we're trying to reduce that as well. So just to give the committee the assurance that we are looking at that. And the other assurance is on Abermule, because that's come up a couple of times. Abermule, I feel quite confident now that we are moving forward on that. We kind of have a weekly, if not fortnightly, update on where we are with that, either from the community itself or from the head of waste and recycling, who has gone grey and lost a lot of hair over Abermule. But I think he feels that he's going to keep his hair now and he's going to stop going grey. So I think we do have some positive reassurance on that one as well. And then finally, on countryside, we do have a capital programme for countryside. So that's probably where most of your costs will be going, and that is set out in this document, so you can see it, but it hasn't been part of the savings. And we do realise, and Matt and I have regular conversations about what more we can do for countryside, because we do think it's one of the most important areas that we have, especially for visitors. And just for you to know, Angela, there are 9,000 kilometres of footpath in Powys, but a large proportion of that, I wouldn't say it's 50%, but certainly I would say 25% is managed and supported by the National Park, Brecon Beacons National Park. So they do an awful lot of work there as well. And one of the areas we want to extend again now after COVID, we weren't able to work with our volunteers. There's something like 200 volunteers on the books for Powys, and we want to start working again with them, but that all takes time to build up. So I hope that gives you some reassurance on some of the other areas, but I feel very comfortable with what Matt has presented to you this afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity for doing so.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Matt, for that. And thank you for all those very thorough impact reports. That made it really helpful for us to understand what was happening there. So we need to move on now. So I apologise to Diane Reynolds, the Head of Economy and Digital Services. We're running behind, but over to you now, Diane, and you've got Councillor Jake and Councillor Jackie here with you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members. I'll just quickly share my screen, although it's not a comprehensive list as some of the ones you've just been looking at. So hopefully we'll be able to get you back on time. So in economy and digital services, we just have one savings proposal, and this is for Careline contract recommission. So this is our emergency alarms, you know, the pull cord alarms. This service or the use of this service has been diminishing. It's on behalf of us and the housing service, and we're looking at how we commission that for the future as the service requirements have changed and digital technology is introduced. So lots of people nowadays use wearables. So like if you've got a watch and you fall over, it can send an SOS message, those kind of things. Obviously it's all interlinked with digital connectivity because it's not available for everybody, and these Careline alarms do work for people, but with the digital switchover that's happening in 2026, we know we've got to move to new technology, and this will slowly be phased out, and that is already happening. So we do need to recommission this contract. So we are giving you some assurance that we can make those savings at this point.
Well, okay, thank you, Diane. That was very short and sweet. And I know it is an important service, though, isn't it? You know, for those people that do need this support, helps them to live home alone.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Do you want me to go on to the pressures?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a few more pressures. We've seen contract inflation, obviously, for our cybersecurity contracts and our ICT contracts. At the moment, we're basing that contract inflation on 12.3%. We are seeing varying percentages, and we're trying to preempt and manage our contracts and reduce the number of contracts we have over time. And we've been working on that for some years. So those are estimated at the moment. We do have Careline contract inflation built in as well, but again, we may be able to reduce some of that along with the other savings. We have cybersecurity tooling that we always have to buy the new tooling, keeping up to date, making sure we keep our estates safe. And we also have temporary funding. We're asking to move to additional funding as that funding's running out for a cybersecurity post to keep on working with ourselves and a bit with schools, making sure our systems, our processes and everything we're doing across the organisation is fit for purpose in looking after our cybersecurity. So it might be looking at incoming threats and daily logs of cyber attacks and making sure that we're responding in the appropriate way. We've then got management of electronic information and subject access requests have both been increasing over time, and we do find that we're struggling to keep up with the volume here. This is a small investment, really, that if we don't invest, we are subject to the ICO enforcement if we don't actually keep up with our level of response in timeline to people that are asking for freedom of information or subject access requests, and we can be fined many hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's a small investment in comparison to those potential fines. Thank you, Chair. I think I've explained everything. Okay.
Hey, lovely. Let's have a look. Has anybody got their hands up here? Well, I think, oh, there we are. Councillor Carl, got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Just on your second slide there, Diane, I think it was the £21,000 saving on Careline. Was it? Are you moving over to Lorowan for that with wearables and excuse me, what have you in care homes, or is that some other system that you've got in mind?
It is a blend at the moment. So the Careline alarms, these are the ones that are actually in people's homes, so that if they fall over, they can actually might have a wearable, like a pendant alarm around their neck, or it might be a pull cord. Those can actually move over to LoRaWAN, but at the moment that technology is very early in the testing stages, and it needs to be 100% workable, that every time you might want to pull that cord, it's going to work. And at the moment, that's not proven. So every local authority is looking at LoRaWAN technology and on the verge of implementing, but no one's actually been brave enough to take that step yet. I am not proposing that we are the first, because I'd like to make sure it's tried and tested in some areas that have got really good connectivity. And we know we haven't got good connectivity everywhere at the moment. Obviously, we're working on that as a separate project, but I think they need to be tested, and we need to look at mobile technology as well as LoRaWAN.
Yeah. I always find it a very good system. I've never seen it fail myself. With the back office of LoRaWAN, will that be managed in-house if you do go over to that, if and when that takes place? Will you have your own officers dedicated to watching the back office there? Because it'd be obviously a bit of further saving if you've got your own officers trained up on that.
Well, we're looking at full automation of the back office system, so that so you take the data, it comes through your gateway, you push it out to a dashboard, and rather than officers sitting there monitoring it, what we do is proactive push of information as an alert to the appropriate officer that would be looking after that resident or that system or whatever it might be. So we're looking at fully automating and not having to have an ongoing monitoring back office cost. We try not to put those in wherever possible.
Okay, I probably didn't word my question properly. Will you be creating your own back office internally? So creating that and then it's up and running, like you say. Will you have your own engineers creating that bit of software for you?
Again, we're trialing that. So we have been trialing an off-the-shelf package. So we brought a timed trial to look at how we can monitor that through the dashboards and push those information through. But we believe we can build an internal process that interacts with our current business intelligence systems. But we're trying to understand that and cost that out. And that project has just been awarded funding to do some of that trials and testing.
Good stuff.
So we haven't got the results of that yet, but we are planning on doing that.
Good, excellent. Glad to hear that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carl. Councillor Chris. You're on mute, Chris.
Technology, thank you for that. Carl had asked some of the similar questions to what I was going to raise on there, but one is in relation to the residents that are going to be affected by the Careline contract on the just seeking assurances that we have communicated with them and give them some ideas that we won't be not leaving them in the lurch, but we will be working with them and keeping them fully informed as this new system develops. And has that been factored in with costs on there? Because again, that need could be a growing need going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think communication with these residents that are often vulnerable really is key. And we actually had very many meetings with BT, who were doing the rollout of moving from the old copper lines into these digital lines, where many of these residents using these services then didn't have the service they required, and making them extremely vulnerable. We had many meetings trying to put a halt to that programme very urgently, which we did manage for a while, until they sorted out and improved their communication. Because the first thing these vulnerable residents are doing was phoning a customer services line and saying, I've got this letter from BT, I don't understand it. So you're right. Communication with these residents is key, but we have to do it in a way that meets their requirements as well. So a letter sometimes just doesn't make sense to them. You have to go out, explain and understand. So if we feel after our recommission of that contract, there is going to be a change that will make it different, or in some way worrying for the resident, we will look at our communication and make sure that that's done in the most effective way. And it might not be the cheapest way, but actually, you know, we get that message across really well.
Thank you.
Councillor Danny.
Yeah, thank you both. I feel this this alarm setup is a very, very long way off. Recently, I've been working at a property, and an old lady there, she was having this system fitted, and it just wouldn't work because there was no mobile phone signal. I said to her son-in-law, wasn't there a system that connected to Wi-Fi? And he didn't believe that there was. And even so, she didn't have Wi-Fi. So it just got abandoned, and that was the end of that story. It didn't progress anymore. Thank you.
I think that is the beauty of LoRaWAN. It's a long range wide area network, can send a signal up to 5 miles, and you don't need Wi-Fi or mobile connectivity, and which is why we're also interested in that technology coming forward. But you're quite right in your assessment, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that looks like there's no more questions there, Diane. So I just want to thank you very much for that report and for that impact assessment. I think this is a really, really important area because, as you've pointed out, these alarms are installed for people who are very, very vulnerable, possibly living on their own, possibly a long way from their family, and can be quite isolated. And so they are literally a lifeline. But also in terms of the lone working, we've got council staff or care staff going out into properties where their help is needed, but not necessarily always welcome. And, you know, they're working antisocial hours on their own. So it's important that we do keep our staff and these other staff safe. So thank you very much for all your work on that. And we look forward to seeing how that develops. Thank you, Diane. Okay, so if there's no more comments on that, we'll move on to the next section, which is workforce and organisation development. And we have Paul Bradshaw, the manager, head of workforce and organisation development, and Councillor Jake to see us through this. So welcome, Paul. I apologise for keeping you waiting. I can see Paul's changed. He looks just like Emma.
Yeah, I'm afraid Councillor Angela, Paul isn't with us today.
I apologise. He did give us apologies early on.
Yeah. So there's no presentation prepared really for this area. The main thing is an increase in DBS charges.
Yes.
And that brings the increase in income of 8,500. You'll know that we do significant numbers of processing of DBSs for a number of other organisations across Wales, and so therefore it's just increasing the income in that area. And then the other element is the growth pressures that we're experiencing in the organisational development team. And at first, when we looked at the budget, it wasn't an area that we were going to be able to receive any growth in, but it was with the revised settlement that we received when we re-looked at the different elements on the table. We realised actually it's an area that we have shortchanged actually for quite some time. There were significant cuts made to the service, over a number of years, and actually in terms of supporting the organisation to move forward and be sustainable for the future, it's an area that we feel we need to invest within. And I'm afraid that's it for the WAD area as we refer to it.
So has anybody got any questions on that? The impact assessment connected to this is on page 473. And a note really that what you're saying is that the DBS charges have increased. Obviously, the council pays a lot of DBS charges for its own staff, but sells that service to other organisations. So is the increase going to be a cost recovery?
Essentially, yeah, we're charging for the services that we receive, and then the income that we get in actually offsets the charges of our own DBSs. So
that was what I was just going to ask. Was it enough to cover a little bit? It was, yeah, okay. So that makes good sense for the council, and it's a service that's in demand, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we had to be pragmatic when looking at this. There was a risk of, if you increase the charges too high, of course, that we would lose the custom and people would go elsewhere or direct to agencies themselves. But we felt that looking at the contracts and the market, etc., that this was fine, and we'd be able to recover these costs.
Yeah. Okay. Jake, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just briefly to say, it is an area that whilst we have, we've got cost recovery here, and you can see that there's a small uplift in income. It is nonetheless an area that we have discussed in some detail. The relevant senior officer bringing forward a further business case for us within the following years, so we can look in detail at our cost pressures and any efficiency opportunities within that service. So it's just good practice within any service to, if you like, look at a business model, because you might say, why have we chosen to do this on behalf of other public bodies? The answer Emma has given is that at the moment that actually is a positive benefit for us. Should circumstances change, or should, for instance, we not have been able to felt that we could have provided a marginal uplift in income, that might have been different. So it is an area we'll keep under review. We will put together a business plan internally for our use, not for external publication, just to make sure that remains the case going into the next few financial years.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Jake. Okay, so there's no more questions on that. I think it was all fairly self-explanatory. We'll move on to the next item, which is transformation and democratic services. And we've got Catherine James here. Hello, Catherine. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, so mine, I think, hopefully is as simple as Emma's that she's just explained there. So on page, I have no presentation. So on page 79, you'll see that there are two items listed against the service. So the first, one of them is a reduction in an APSI subscription service fees. So that's £3,612, and another is a reduction in general office expenses, which is £4,360, both of which contribute to a total of just under £8,000. So as you can see on the impact assessment, it's page 213. This doesn't have any impact on the public or staff. These are things that we've looked at carefully, and we've put forward as proposed savings. It's important to add maybe that we're a very small service. We don't have a huge budget. So although it might not sound a lot of money, actually it's as much, do you know what I mean? We don't have much money there. Yeah. No, because another thing I suppose it's important to point out is, although that democratic services is 100% funded by the base budget, what was transformation and communications is not. So each year we have to bring in our own income to fund what we do have. So we have 9.6 FTE posts that we have to fund ourselves each year. So that's obviously part of where a lot of our focus goes. And I hope that's self-explanatory, but if anyone's got any questions.
Okay, open to the committee. No, I think, again, you've done a very good job, Catherine. You've explained it clearly, and that all makes sense, I think. So thank you very much, and apologies for keeping you waiting, although I think we're actually now back on time, aren't we?
You're dead on time. It's very impressive.
So thank you very much, Catherine. Appreciate that. So now we'll move on to community services, and we've got Jenny Ashton here, and I believe Councillor David Selby, who is our portfolio holder, a cabinet member for a more prosperous Powys. So welcome to both of you, and thank you very much for coming today.
Lovely, thank you very much. And could I just also say that Councillor Jake is the portfolio holder for catering and cleaning. So if Councillor Jake would like to comment at all on this as I'm going through, then please do. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, if you're all able to see that.
Not yet, no.
Still not come through?
No, afraid. Well, I can't. Can anybody see?
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
No.
Okay.
No. No.
Oh dear, famous last words. Had to happen at some point, didn't it? There we are.
Looking good.
Well done, Jenny. Got there in the end.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so just a little reminder of the services that are within community services. So we've got cultural services made up of libraries, archives, information management, arts and museums. We have leisure services, sports development, the catering and cleaning service. So in terms of the proposed savings, we've put forward the art service redesign process. This is to look at the whole of the arts service within the authority. Currently, the arts service is a commissioned service, and dedicated officer works with arts organisations throughout the county. We have a number of key stakeholders who receive varying grants from the authority to help support their organisations. They have recognised over time that they need to be a little more self-sufficient than perhaps they currently are. And in previous years, they have been supported by grants from the council, and more recently through a COVID recovery grant. There was always the understanding that the grants to the organisations would decrease over time. And in order to make this saving, unfortunately, the post associated with the service will need to be lost. However, we have managed to secure a Share Prosperity Fund grant, which will help to support the development of an art strategy, which we will invite the arts partners to be part of to ensure the sustainability of the service going forwards. The next reduction is the reduction in the library book budget. This is currently a book budget of 176,000, and the proposed reduction is 56,770. There is a risk that a fewer number of books will be able to be purchased as part of the saving proposal, but there will still be a good circulation of books and the ability to purchase books for the library service throughout Powys. The library service is a statutory service, and it reports to Welsh Government through the Welsh Library Standards. We are not sure what a reduction of the budget will create in terms of the library standards, but we will be working closely with Welsh Government to mitigate any impact there. The next saving we've got is to reduce the core budget for sports development. The sports development service is made up mainly of grant funded officer posts through Sport Wales, and there is a small core budget for the service. Disability Sport Wales in the next financial year have changed the way that they will invest in local authorities in the future, which has created a reduction in the budget in the grant that we receive from them. Therefore, we have managed to reduce some of the core budget that supports that post, and also some of the other funding within the service. There is also in progress at the moment a regionalisation proposal from Sport Wales, which means that Powys and Ceredigion will work more closely together in the future as a Mid-Wales sports partnership. So any future budget for the service will need to be found through collaborative working with partners such as health, education, and a range of others. We have a reduction in business miles. We feel that this is achievable for the service, as many of us are working from home. Frontline services obviously are still within their allocated buildings, but in terms of business miles and business travel, this is achievable. We also have the Neathport Talbot College occupation of Agaya. There are community spaces within the Agaya building and also the cafe that MPTC have an agreement now with Powys that they will occupy those areas, and this will generate a £35,000 income for the service. And there is also a proposal to increase school meals by 187,000. This is through a 10p increase, a proposed increase for primary and secondary meals within the service. We have a comparator with other authorities throughout Wales, and Powys is one of the lowest in terms of school meals currently. So a 10p increase would bring us in line with some of the other authorities as part of this proposal. Would you like me to move on to the pressures, or would you like me to pause?
Yeah, no, I think do the pressures as well. Then we'll do the questioning together. I think it's worked quite well. Thank you, Jenny.
So in terms of the budget pressures that we have in the budget for next year, I'm sure that you will have all seen just before Christmas a cabinet report with regards to leisure. Freedom Leisure have been having discussions with Powys for us to understand the energy pressure that is on them and the industry as a whole throughout the UK currently in terms of energy increases, energy prices. They are predicting that potentially there could be up to over £1 million in terms of utilities impact into the next financial year, but this will be monitored and reviewed on a very regular basis. Powys will have an open book arrangement with them going forwards. As part of the report and the withdrawal of the proposals just before Christmas, it was agreed that a leisure review will be undertaken in 2023 and will begin very soon to agree a future sustainable model for the leisure service. We also have a pressure of 170,000, which is to cover the overall loss on the catering service. Currently, we are gathering more reliable data in terms of the catering service and the provision. We receive grants from Welsh Government with regards to the free school meal entitlement and the new universal free school meal rollout, which has begun, and for all primary pupils to be entitled to that free school meal by April 2024. And also as part of the Freedom Leisure and the cabinet report that went to cabinet before Christmas, it was to address the in-year deficit position of 287,000 that again was agreed would be covered due to the more than expected settlement from Welsh Government in the next financial year. So just to say then, as part of our service considerations, and to help support the savings and the pressures, we constantly look at transformation and co-location of services. The review of the service delivery and provision will be undertaken in the next financial year. We have shared prosperity fund projects and bids that have been secured, and a number of grants that help to support service delivery, energy, capital, equipment and digital projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. So there's quite a mixed bag there as well, isn't there? So any questions from the committee? So Councillor Carl, first, put your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jenny, for that. I'm led to believe that Freedom Leisure has said they'll close leisure centres in Paris. Is that correct?
Apologies, Councillor Carl, that they've closed leisure centres.
No, they've. Whoops, hang on, I got a few difficulty there. They've suggested that they may close leisure through.
Currently, I haven't received any suggestions of closures of leisure centres, and I'm not aware that Powers have received that.
I don't know if you're freezing, Councillor Carl. Would you like to turn your camera off and perhaps that'll work a little bit better? Okay, perhaps we'll go to Councillor Chris and hopefully Carl can sort his connectivity issue. Oh, there we are, he's back with us actually. Do you want to try again, Carl? We were losing you there. Would it work better with your camera off, perhaps?
Sorry about that, Chair. Yeah, I'm led to believe that Freedom Leisure have said that they may close leisure centres in Paris. I just wanted to know, is that true or not, or is that just not true?
Councillor Carl, it's not something that I'm aware of or have been made aware of at this time. Freedom Leisure are working with us with regards to the leisure review, and that is in planning stages currently, and details of that will be shared with all members and scrutiny committees when we have those further details available. So I'm afraid I don't have any answers to anything you've heard with regards to closures of leisure centres. As you know, the Cabinet have confirmed that no leisure centres will close in the next financial year.
Well, that gives me great confidence. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Selby, I see you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in on that particular point?
Perhaps so. Jenny's explained our position, but one thing it may have got confused with is Freedom good campaign about the pressures that they're under, along with the whole of the leisure centre industry, about with regard to their utility bills, and some of the publicity that they put out says to stop your leisure centres being closed, which is not the same as saying that they want to close them, and I think that's probably where that has got mixed up.
Call to use it or lose it maybe is, yeah. Okay, exactly. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. I was just interested in the proposed savings. You'd mentioned that Neath and Port Talbot College occupancy of a Gaia. Is that generating 35,000 for the utilisation of both the cafeteria area and then the two subsequent rooms that they've got on the ground floor?
Yes, that's
in
correct.
Total. Right, okay. Surprises me. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Arwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm what sort of Councillor David Selby said, right, regarding Freedom Leisure. I'd see the report in the press saying that obviously they were under financial pressure, and obviously if funding wasn't, well, increased funding wasn't available from authorities, well, obviously they would have to look at, closing sort of leisure facilities, really. But yeah, but no, the other, well, not the issue I've got is on the impact assessment regarding the sports development grants of 35,000 reduction in 35,000 on the sports development. It states that they got to consult with the unions by the 5th of January and with the staff by the 9th of January. Have consultations sort of started, or?
The consultation process has ended now with the particular officer concerned, so that process has been concluded. Yeah. It's unfortunate, as it's not us that's had to put that reduction of staff forward, but it has been managed and concluded.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arwell. Councillor Adrian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jenny. On the topic of free school meals, some schools will need some revamps of kitchens, etc. Where does that funding come from? Which area?
So there is a whole programme at the moment through Welsh Government to improve equipment and upgrade kitchens. Okay. There are varying conditions of kitchens throughout Powys currently, and those are being assessed. And the team are working to understand the necessary equipment. That also ties in with the rollout of the universal free school meal provision, and the Welsh Government funding is linked to that as well. So currently the team and the service are doing a lot of work around the numbers of children who are on universal free school meals. It's currently at 70%. We are looking to assess how many that will mean in the future, and also working very closely with the school transformation team in terms of what the school future school infrastructure will look like, to make sure that we have the most appropriate kitchens and service available in the future.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a supplementary question on the free school meal? So if the proposal is to put it up by 10 pence per meal, do the Welsh Government reimburse Powys for the free school meals? And do they reimburse it at a standard rate or the Powys rate?
Yes, the Welsh Government do reimburse Powys. Currently they pay £2.90 for a school meal. Currently, the primary meal in Powys is £2.35 and a secondary meal is at £2.45. Obviously, a 10 pence increase would help towards the income for the service. But again, an exercise is being undertaken to understand the overall income received, the costs of the service, and then what the rollout of the universal free school meal provision will look like over the next 18 months.
Okay. So Welsh Government pay a set fee regardless of whether it's primary or high school?
They do. No, sorry, the universal free school meal is just for primary schools.
Right. But if there were children on free school meals in high school, the Welsh Government would pay?
Yes, they do. Yeah,
the standard rate. I just work. How does that work across Powys if it's not a set rate across? Across Wales if it's not a set rate.
For universal free school meal rollout and entitled free school meal pupils, it is a set rate from Welsh Government currently. It's our own charges that are not set, so they are different throughout Wales.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Jenny. My question is actually around free school meals as well, or almost comments. I know the deficit you sort of mentioned to us, 170,000. That's not huge in terms of the canteen budget. I get that, but my question is around, and you've almost answered some of it. I mean, you say eligibility for free school or universal free school meals is 70%, but actually the uptake is way less than 40%. So there's lots of people that are eligible that aren't claiming it. But my question was, do Welsh Government pay for actual meals provided, or do they pay per meal for anyone that's eligible? So are we claiming money from Welsh Government that isn't directly being utilised through that? And then I guess, are we looking at the incentive? If Welsh Government are paying £2.90, we're charging parents £2.35, £2.45, whatever, to increase or to speed up that free school meal rollout based on the fact that Welsh Government are repaying us for it, and what's the calculation look like if we speed that up? We haven't got long to deliver it anyway. We've got another year and a half, as you say, to get it across all primary schools, but at the moment we're only delivering across 2-year groups. Is that correct? And planning on 2 more this coming term. So yeah, just a couple of questions around almost looking to the future, that free school meals rollout.
Okay, thank you. Chair, Jane's got a hand up. I don't know, does she want to come in on that before I respond?
Over to you, Jane.
Just a point of clarity, really. There are 2 aspects now to free school meals. You've got the universal rollout of pupil free meals, which is funded on a per pupil basis. However, for the free meals element that's been in the settlement and so on for a number of years, that isn't based on individual numbers. It is based on an allocation through the settlement that relates to free school meals and take up. So it's not exactly match for match for every meal that we have. It's an allocation in the settlement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay. Carry on, Jenny.
Apologies. Was there any other part of your question that,
well, it was,
I haven't answered? Sorry.
I guess knowing that helps a bit, but are we as an authority looking at speeding up that rollout, trying to get ahead of ourselves a little bit so that we can claim some of the advantages that come through that national rollout provision? And are we just, I guess, subsequent question, but are we stopping at primary schools in the future? Other local authorities have committed to high schools. Don't know if that's on our agenda. Maybe it's not for today anyway. Sorry.
Okay. The rollout is part of the Welsh Government initiative. So we are working to planned rollout with Welsh Government in terms of timescales. That is also based on the upgrade of kitchens that we've talked about previously, and also having that structure within the service and understanding the structure needed within the service in terms of staffing, etc., to be able to roll that out in the timescale agreed. So at the moment, we're not in a position to speed that up any more than we already are.
I can see Councillor Jake has got his hand up. Would you like to come in there, Jake?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, it's obviously slightly complex because we have a series of streams. What we're looking at is a 10 pence increase on the meals which are paid for by children. So they're the ones that are paid for by children that aren't eligible for either of the streams of free school meal provision, either the free school meal or the universal free school meal, which is being rolled out in 2 years. I mean, of those eligible for free school meals, we've got about a 70% take up at the moment. But overall, I think we've got about 56% of pupils having a hot meal with us in a school at any point in time. Now, bearing in mind all of the health, the mental health, physical health attributes which come with children having, we think, a well-balanced and meal provided on school premises. We want to uplift that general uptake, and that will both be additional uptake of those eligible for free school meals, but also an uptake of those that are having paid for meals. And of course, in relation to the paid for meals, we are doing some more work this year. I mean, Jenny's new in post, I'm new in post, on ascertaining whether the best balance lies for us, because we do need to get to a point of better cost recovery than we have at the moment. And interestingly, we've started some work now on cost comparators. And one thing I wasn't aware of, Jenny's referred to the kitchens that we have. Obviously, one of the issues that we have is that we have 22 schools that don't actually have their own kitchen, and it was alluded to earlier about the quality of kitchens, which means that other schools have then to cook and transport food across to those. those schools. So we have a whole series of pressures. And what Jenny's indicated is, as part of the transformation programme, school kitchen availability is just one of those extra areas that we need to weave into those considerations, so that we can generally increase school provision at school meals, because we think it's beneficial. But I'd certainly be interested to carry on working with you, Councillor Gary, in relation to the Food Network side of things that we've started conversations on, because actually getting as much of that quality provision provided locally is where we want to be, isn't it? But it is quite complex, and Jenny and I are getting to grips with it, and we look for your ongoing support.
Thank you, both. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I've got a couple of questions myself, as my committee have gone quiet. I'm just looking at the library service, and obviously I think we can all see that it makes sense to have services co-locating wherever possible. But one of the risks there to the service is that there'll be a reduction in the number of books available. And I just wonder whether there's any sort of way in which perhaps people could donate books. I can't be the only person that has a whole pile of books bought for me at Christmas that are read once and given away. And possibly some of them, like new, perhaps could be donated to the library. I mean, I guess that you wouldn't want a whole load of scracky old books, but that could be an option maybe. So it was just an idea. No response needed really, but I did want to the arts service, the reduction of staff by one full-time member. But if there is only one full-time member anyway, we are getting rid of a service, are we not?
The arts service, a lot of, or most of the work currently is commissioned out to external organisations. We don't actually deliver an arts service in-house. So the officer post works with the organisations and coordinates the arts activities that are undertaken. But it's the organisations that deliver those activities, and the work that they undertake is grant funded. And unfortunately, at the moment in Paris, we don't have a specific arts strategy, and that is what the Shared Prosperity Fund is going to be there to do, is to help support those organisations and Paris to develop an arts strategy for the future, to encourage and support those organisations to become more self-sustainable. The loss of the post, some of that work will be then undertaken by the cultural services, and nobody wants to lose a post within a service, but due to the savings needed from the service, unfortunately we have had cuts over time. We've done a lot of salami slicing, and we really are getting down to bare bones of our services now, and we don't have many other places to go.
I kind of get where you're coming from, but I am concerned about that one. I think the media and arts industry is a growing industry across Wales, isn't it? We've got a lot of now actors, and there's a whole industry there down in Cardiff, and we know that arts are really important to people's mental health and well-being. And I know you say in the Arts Council will be supporting Powys, but Powys isn't a thing or a person, it needs a person, doesn't it? So I'm a bit confused by that, but I can see that David Selby has got his hand up, so perhaps you're going to enlighten me.
Chair, I agree, it is important. I mean, I think the problem we've had is that we've got a process of funding that's been the same for years, and there are organisations that get funding and some don't get funding, and what we need to do is to find a way forward to support, and in many ways, whether that comes from our own direct funding in the future, or more likely through being smarter, helping the organisations find the right type of grant funding. But that's why we want to carry out that. And I know it sounds like we only do reviews in my portfolio, but that isn't the case at all. It's important for us to find a way forward. And there was a danger that we had a post that was costing us more than the grants that we were able to provide through the grant funding. That didn't make sense either. So we want to get on with finding a better way of dealing with it and help the organisations that we can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that does sort of make sense as well. Yes, I can see both sides there. So basically you're saying that that role to some degree will be sort of absorbed into the cultural services role, so that there will be an actual person doing something with arts within the county.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. We're not just like wiping our hands of the arts and saying it's nothing to do with the local authority. No. Okay,
No,
thank you very
not.
much. That was what sort of confused me a bit. And then the other one you might not be surprised to know that I did just want to touch on again was the leisure centre situation, because I'm slightly confused by that as well. So obviously there in the budget, that's a financial challenge for you to find that over £1 million for the next year, on top of the 287,000 that's already been spent in this sort of quarter. But I'm just curious, what other monies do we spend at Freedom Leisure, or do we support Freedom Leisure with? So does the local authority already support Freedom Leisure financially in any way?
So Paris pay Freedom Leisure a management fee, an annual management fee, which is made up of a payment from the leisure service and from the school service. The school service, as I'm sure most people know, use the leisure centres for their curriculum, PE, after school activities and various other activities, events, exams, and the list goes on. So the management fee to Freedom Leisure is around 2.3 million per year. And some of that is made up of grant funding as well. So Paris received funding from the National Exercise Referral Scheme, which is about £240,000 per year, and grants from Sport Wales as well for Free Swim Initiative, and other smaller grants that go to Freedom Leisure to deliver the leisure service on behalf of Paris.
Okay, right. And that management fee would feature in the main budget pack that we've said, so that doesn't need to feature here because there's no change in it. Is that right?
No, there's no change to that. The management fee actually reduces year on year as well as part of the contract arrangement.
Okay, reduced. Right. Okay, that explains that. There we are. Thank you. So the £1.1 million features because that's a new extra.
That's correct.
Cost to the council. Okay, so if none of the committee have got any other questions on that. No, well, thank you very much, Jenny. Again, a very good set of papers there, and a good presentation that, apart from my misunderstanding there, explained everything very clearly. So thank you, Jenny, and thank you, David.
Thank you.
So we move on now to housing, and we have, I believe, Andy Thompson, Head of Housing, with us, and Councillor Matthew Durrance, who is the portfolio holder and Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for A Fairer Powys. Welcome both. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting so long. And we're in your hands.
Okay. Councillor Durrance, would you, or shall I go first? Or
I'll just briefly introduce this. So I think this is a good position for housing within this council budget, and that's because the Cabinet has recognised the significant challenges that we've got around increasing homelessness levels. And when we look at the data, I think we've seen, you know, a doubling in our homelessness presentations with a budget that's remained the same. So we are being asked to do more with the same resource. So whilst we're not putting forward any service reductions or cuts to the overall housing budget, actually there is still pressures within the system. And I think that's why we're at this position. There is a couple of parts to this for housing. There's the Housing General Fund, the Housing Revenue Account, and of course the capital strategy and the pressures that you'll see in the agenda packs. Andy will talk us through all of those components and what that means for us in terms of the delivery of the service over the next financial year. But happy to take any questions from colleagues as and when. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. So, Andy, I think we're over to you.
Okay, thank you. As Councillor Dorrance pointed out, we have two strands to the housing budget. We have the housing revenue account, which is funded entirely by rents from tenants. That money can only be spent on services to council tenants or services that will be of benefit to them. The Housing General Fund is made up of a mix of funding from the council and grant funding from the Welsh Government and other agencies, and that deals with all the services that we provide for housing that are not connected with the landlord service. By law, neither can fund the other. So you cannot use general fund resources to fund works to or improvements to council houses. By the same token, you can't use the housing revenue account to provide housing general fund services, which are pretty much statutory. So that includes homelessness, disabled facilities grants and works to help people who are disabled enjoy their homes, and enforcement action against private property owners who don't meet the necessary standards. If I look at the capital first, in terms of the HRA, housing revenue account is next year alone scheduled to invest £19.68 million in new homes. And similar sums for the next 2 or 3 years. There will, of course, be presented to members in the next the next few weeks, actually, the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan, which is pretty much like the process that we're going through now for the General Fund, but restricted to the landlord service, and that will cover revenue and capital expenditure. I think that's scheduled to go to Cabinet sometime in March, because it has to be submitted to the Welsh Government by the end of March. If we look at the general fund, the main issues that we have there are around, look at the things that are working well. We have disabled facilities grants. We have, which I think supports a fairer Powys, helping people to enjoy their homes. We have home improvements and works around energy efficiency, which supports a greener Powys. And we have the empty homes work, which I think is a stronger Powys because we're providing more homes. But the main item within the general fund revenue strand is homelessness, as Councillor Dorrance has recognised. If I can just give you a few quick statistics there. In 2017-2018, Council had 383 homeless presentations. Those are people who came to us for help as homeless. In 2022, that was 1,078. In 2019, we had 389 people in temporary accommodation throughout the year. Throughout 2022, we dealt with 1,271, 80% of which were single people. In real terms, the budget for homelessness has not increased since I joined the authority in 2018. So we have a massive demand there. Homes in Powys, which is also a general fund function. This is the joint venture, if you like, we have with housing associations, in which we manage the way all social housing in Powys, regardless of who owns it, ourselves or housing associations, is allocated. So people have one place to go, if you will, to apply for housing in their community. It saves them having to make lots of applications to different housing associations. That is a general fund function. 2017-18, 1,937 households. Today, as of today, 4,717. There's 65,000 households in Powys, so you are not far off 10% of households registering for affordable housing. Half the people registered with homes in Powys are single-person households. Just 6% of all homes in Powys, regardless of tenure, are suitable for single people. As you're aware, the social security system is not terribly generous to people who are single and have more than one bedroom. The Bevan Foundation produced research last year which showed that 73.9% of people in Powys who are renting privately, their rent exceeds the local housing allowance. So although we haven't put any pressures down and we haven't made any savings, it's because we are, through the hard work of the team and a general restructure of the service, we are just about managing to manage this increasing demand. We do have a couple of projects that we'd like to bring forward in the next few months. One is a 24/7 triage provision, because we do not have that in Powys. That means we have to use bed and breakfast accommodation, which is not ideal, and to introduce modular interim temporary accommodation. So they will be coming to members, and they will, I suspect, need some financial support from the council to make them work. But they are ways to avoid us using bed and breakfast and to provide a better service while we work really hard to increase the number of homes in Powys. We need a net increase of homes. So we've got quite a vibrant or growing new build programme. So I think, as Councillor Dorrance said, we've coped with this increase in demand within the existing budget. It's been really tight, but the teams are working literally all the time to deal with this. I don't know if there's anything further you want me to say, Councillor Dorrance, or is anything further members have questions?
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you, Matthew. And Danny's the first to put his hand up, so I'm sure there'll be a few questions here. So Danny, over to you.
Yeah, thank you all. Can you just clarify to me what modular, what was it? I can't read my own writing now. Modular interim accommodation is, please.
Well, basically, it's accommodation that is, I mean, if you imagine, say, a porter cabin, or in Brighton, when I was working down in Sussex, they used shipping containers. They're basically interim accommodation that's provided on a temporary basis that you can move from site to site. So it's self-contained. People have their own front doors. Say you've got a site that you know you can't develop for 3 years for permanent housing. You put these units on there, and then people can live in them, and it's an interim accommodations thing. Generally, you use them for homeless people because they don't want to live in there forever for obvious reasons. But it means they've got their own front door, their own bathroom, their own kitchen, those sort of things, while we look for permanent accommodation for them. They do require planning consent. So there are issues we have to deal with that, and we need to find the sites for them. If I give you the example I gave you in Brighton, that's now the units have been removed and it's been developed for permanent housing. But what it meant was you didn't have a plot of land sitting there doing nothing for years. So we do need to push that through. I need to get a report done on that and put through to members to decide. It won't happen overnight, but it'll happen a lot more quickly than building permanent homes. So we can use sites like car parks and places we may have bought for further development. If the sites have been bought, for example, for road extensions, I don't think we've got any of those in Powys, but you could use those for that. And of course, they can be moved. So you use them on one site. The model we would go for is we could move them on the back of a truck to another site. So, in their 10-year lifespan, they could possibly longer if they're good quality. They can provide somewhere for somebody to live that I think is a vast improvement over a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a good idea. It's just it's not a term that I've ever heard.
I'm sorry.
But no,
okay.
Thanks for the explanation. Thank you, much appreciated.
Okay, Councillor Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Thompson, planning approval for 28 affordable homes was granted on a site just in Gilsfield early last year, and the Section 106 has still not been put in place. Now, I just want, the question is, how connected are you to planning and legal services to make sure that where we have planning applications coming through for affordable homes, that they're actually pushed through the system quickly so that developers can get on and get building?
We are well connected with planning, but I'd like to take that one forward and get back to you on that, find out specifically the details on that, if I may.
I've raised it with Cabinet Member Councillor Jake Berryman, and quite honestly, I'm really unimpressed with senior officers. They haven't come back. I've been waiting for 10 days, and quite frankly, something needs to happen, and very quickly.
Okay. Have you got the name of the site?
Sorry, can I interrupt you both, gentlemen? I'm really sorry. I know that's an important issue, but could I ask you, Councillor Ian and Andy, to get together separate to this, because this is a budget meeting and we need to stick to the budget. I'm really conscious of the time factor we've got, but I think that is an important issue, and that's one that perhaps you could get together on and try to resolve, and I'd support that. So thank you for that, Ian. But you do raise a general point there, I suppose, about housing. If we've got this shortage of housing, and you mentioned there single person households, I guess a lot of the housing stock within Powys would be family homes, 2, 3 or maybe 4 bedroom properties. And I guess if you put a single person in there, then you've got a home that's taken out that a family might want. But I'm just interested, how does it work? So I'm guessing maybe, or I'm making a lot of guessing, aren't I? But I'm assuming that a lot of these single people might actually have children that don't live with them permanently. So when somebody comes to you at risk of homeless, perhaps their family's, you know, broken up or whatever, how do you decide what's the appropriate housing for them? Because they might actually temporarily, for short times, have family children come and stay with them.
The main criteria is that people on low and middle income may be reliant upon housing costs through the social security system, basically through universal credit. And that's when the spare room subsidy or bedroom tax kicks in. We're quite happy for people to have a slightly larger home, and we do an affordability check if they need an extra bedroom. But a lot of people, because their incomes are low and they are reliant upon social security, don't want to take that risk of having their housing element cut by 25%. And that's what the challenge is. I've worked in low demand areas in the country where you allocate, used to before this, 3-bedroom houses to single people, because single people become couples, become families. It's the way life goes. But this new change, or relatively new change, to social security has made that increasingly hard, and people are careful. They don't want to run into rent arrears, so they want to manage that risk. Only 6% of the homes in Powys are 1-bedroom properties. And our population is not only 6% of people. It really affects those who have a low income, I'm afraid. It's not that we don't want them to have homes, because we'd love to. It's people saying, hold on, I can't afford that. I really can't take that risk.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andy, for the information today. I'm sorry if this is a bit of a daft question. There's a lot of papers and I may have missed the detail or just got the wrong understanding. But what I can't see clearly in the papers was a housing development budget, if you like. So in the capital programme, I can see that there's a general fund for housing, where I guess I'm trying to find out what allocation of money, if any, we've put to our own housing build development, and what that figure is forecast for next year.
Okay, that will be included in the Housing Revenue Account business plan, which will be the subject of a separate report to Cabinet. I can tell you that next year we've penciled in, and we're still working on the business plan at the moment, excuse me, 19.68 million for new build next year. The business plan is a 30-year business plan. We go into detail for 10 years, so it's always a rolling 30. So when that comes to members, and I say we're just waiting for the final number crunching from our finance colleagues. Now that rents have been set, our income has come, that will set out very clearly where the development programme goes. So that sits within the housing revenue account, and it is kind of a bit like the process, I'm afraid, we've all gone through today. We have to go through again for the housing revenue account. But yes, it is a substantial amount of money. All our schemes have to pay back. Jane is very strict, and indeed so am I. You know, if they don't pay all their costs back within 60 years, we don't do them. So, you know, they add to the net number of stock, and yeah, good value. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. I realise now it will come forward in a later date. I was just worried I'd missed it somewhere or hadn't quite got the clarity. Thank you, Andy.
There is also, Councillor Mitchell, a budget line in the capital strategy for new builds and repurchases. You'll see that following through in the medium-term financial strategy. I think it's on page 38 of the document.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chris, you're next to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. I was just interested in getting a bit more clarification about the triage provision that you mentioned on the, because to me that says more than just housing. because sometimes those people that are homeless have issues related to health, and could come from military backgrounds, which we have a lot on here within Powys. And I just wondered what partnership and collaboration arrangements within that triage facility have been discussed or are going to be worked through going forward.
The proposal is to provide 24/7 self-contained accommodation for people, and they come in as homeless. So if they're homeless at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning, we've got somewhere to put them. We've been developing that proposal with our colleagues in social services. As you now know, housing is in the same directorate under Nina. So they will be, the idea is to call in that support from our social services colleagues, or for example, Pobble, who provide housing support as and when it's needed. People in the 24/7 triage would only be there for, not very long. The idea is they've got somewhere to go. We can say, okay, let's look at what you need. You need to go into, say, fully supported accommodation with help from somebody in the mental health team, or actually you're quite able to look after yourself, so we just need to find you your own front door. So absolutely, we fully recognize a large proportion of our clients now who are homeless do have other needs. They do have issues relating, as you said, to leaving the forces, and not being sort of au fait with the civilian way of life. We have people with mental health challenges, and we have people, sadly, who have abusing drugs and alcohol. So we do work with our social services colleagues. We do have the housing support grant fund to help out as well. But people won't just be put in there and there's the key and leave them alone. Absolutely not, because that's just not right.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was thinking about council housing itself, sort of linking with what you were talking about, the cuts in social security if you've got empty bedrooms. So we may have council tenants who, like you say, had gone into a council house, got married, had a family, perhaps living in a 3-bedroom house. Now they're older generation. Do we have enough council stock? Is there any facility there for them to be able to downsize?
It's the same problem, Councillor Davis. We don't have enough smaller homes. People who are in a larger home and downsize do get a bit of extra priority on homes in Powys, but it is just the lack of smaller homes. And it applies also for people, because people on homes in Powys will include people who want to downsize. There will be people who have downsized. Pensioners don't have to pay the bedroom tax, but of course there's a long time between when the children leave home and when your pension kicks in, unless you're like me and they're still here. But there we go. Okay, sorry, I think Councillor, sorry.
No, it's fine. And I think it's a really, really good question, because I think what we've got to recognise is that people's housing need changes throughout their life.
Yes.
So you'll see that the council is, working to develop what we're calling extra care schemes, so that we can provide different opportunities for where people live. And of course, when people move on into those sort of housing settings, that frees up some of the stock back into general needs for us to be able to reallocate to new families. But the reality of the situation is, and this I think is a national, certainly a Welsh issue, that we built 3-bedroom family homes when we were building previously, and the way that we build now is going to have to change, because there are different needs within the housing register. But we've got to do that in partnership with the other RSLs, registered social landlords, and we are absolutely focused on this through the strategic housing partnership that we chair as a council, to try and get the right types of homes into the right places for people. But that bedroom tax has put financial pressure and poverty onto people living in our housing stock. We've got a money advice service within the housing team and within the council. We're able to issue things like discretionary housing payments to help people. But the reality is that the introduction of that policy has been a punitive measure that's hit people with the least incomes.
Yeah, and I take on board, so I hadn't realised that if you were a pensioner, you didn't have the cut, but you're still effectively heating a home that, the cost of living is higher, isn't it, in a larger home? So there seems to be an emphasis when there's a new building estate that there has to be an element of affordable homes. So it always seems to be that we're looking or assuming that it's people wanting to get on the housing ladder. But it seems from what you're saying, that isn't where the demand is within Powys then. It's not people trying to get on that housing ladder, it's people who just want a home, not to buy.
A lot of people who would like to buy a home can't afford to buy one. So they join the housing register. 5 years ago, they might have been able to afford to buy one. It's the disparities. House prices go up, you know, and their wages don't go up. Their only option is to go into affordable housing. I mean, the average house price ratio now, loan to value in Powys, is about 6.3 to 1. And yet many moons ago, it was 3 to 1. You know, so it's not that people don't want to buy a home, it's that they just can't afford to. So where do they turn to? If you can't afford to buy, you probably can't afford to rent, because the rents will reflect the mortgages. So people turn to social housing. So we just need more homes. I think that's what it's all down to, I'm afraid. There we go.
And I think the broader point on that from H here is that this budget enables us to start that work. So if you're looking at the capital strategy, definitely resource that's being aligned to delivering more homes, whether that be building new ones, bringing empty homes back into use, or acquiring existing homes that are in the private rented sector into our stock as well. So we've got a vision for it, and we've got the resources aligned to be able to deliver on it.
Okay, so although the picture's not rosy, in a way we could say it's positive. We've identified the need and you're taking steps to address that, albeit they're quite small steps, to be fair, in the bigger picture. Well, thank you very much. So committee, no more questions for housing? Well, there we are, gentlemen. Compliment indeed. That means you've done your job well, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So next we move on to finance. Jane has got her camera on ready. So yeah, over to you, Jane. Jane Thomas, our Finance and Section 151 officer. And I don't know if Councillor David Thomas is here with us today, but I'm sure you're going to take us through it all. Oh, there he is. Hello, David. Welcome. Thank you, Jane. Over to you.
Okay, mine won't take too long either. You'll be pleased to hear there are 3 pressures that are really impacting on the finance service. They total collectively £89,000. They're shown on page 137 of your report pack. These relate to contract inflation uplifts across some of the system contracts that we have in place for council tax and for our finance system, and also for our internal audit service. And then we have one post that has been funded in the past from the Transformation Fund, which we're now having to support ourselves. We did support that post previously, so that has created a pressure for us as well. So those are the cost pressures that we are looking to manage in the service. And to do so, we have been able to identify £72.6 thousand worth of savings, and those are shown on page 78. And there's also an impact assessment shown on page 457 for those proposals. They are 2 proposals in the main. One is the reduction of a post within our service. And that post has already been removed through the management of change process. So that saving is already achieved in readiness for next year. And then there are some smaller savings where we will look to further reduce our travel budgets and some of our other administrative budgets by reducing costs across those to deliver on the full 72.6. So those are the only impacts that you see for us in terms of our finance service budget.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. So any questions from the floor there? No. Well, there we are. I mean, yeah, as you say, Jane, the papers were there. The impact assessment clearly states what's going on. I don't know, David, if you have anything to add.
No, I have nothing to add to that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Jane's covered all that.
No. Okay. Well then, thank you very much. And we'll move on to the final part of the agenda, and that's the legal services. And I think, have we got Clive here to deliver this for us?
No, there's an apology from Clive, Chair, and it's a single reduction on the cost pressures report of £1,500 reduction of the travel budget from 3,000 down to 1,500, and that's basically it.
Yeah, and I can't imagine there's any questions on that. It's sort of self-explanatory, isn't it? If there's less travel, there's less cost there. So, but committee, have you got any comments or questions on that? No, I think everybody's happy with that. So can I just say thank you to all the officers and to the cabinet members for coming to this meeting today. I know it's been a long session and I went a little bit over time at one point there, but I really appreciate you hanging in there and bearing with us. I think now, committee, we just need to think about any recommendations we would like to make going forward on these budget proposals. So I'm in your hands. You raised a number of concerns. So is there anything in particular you'd like to highlight at this point? Don't all shout out at once. Councillor Gary.
Oh yeah, thanks, Chair. Start us off, I guess, with a couple of possible questions. One was around, obviously, in some of the more finite details in all of the paper packs, we've seen that sort of increased charges provision table and things like that, and I guess look through them in reasonable detail, comfortable with most of them. I guess the one that I just might raise as a consideration was the one actually around car parking. So obviously comes into sort of HTR stuff, and I guess it's one of those really emotive subjects as well. We know that our town centres are really under pressure. We know that it's quite a public decision, if you like, as well, or becomes a very public decision. And I guess I'm raising a bit of a concern that I'm seeing 150% increase across long stay car parking charges planned for this year. And whilst it's a very small minor adjustment in terms of the actual income, it is that sort of headline grabbing figure, and that generally does worry me. And I know many of our town centre high streets, or even at some of our smaller community shops and stuff, will struggle with any car parking charge increase. And I guess my concern is we're looking at putting up the long stay and the short stay a bit, but not so considerable. But I can't yet see a figure in there for anything around annual parking permits. I think it sort of says to be confirmed. So the question is it to be confirmed, or are we not putting them up? And are we comfortable with a 150% increase on long stay parking? That was one.
So is your recommendation, are you recommending or suggesting we recommend that be looked at again?
I think perhaps just I would guess I'd want to be sure that there has been an impact assessment looked at it, because is it just going to reduce the number of people that are willing to pay for it? Is it going to give us more on-street parking problems because people are trying to park elsewhere? Has all of that been considered? And perhaps just either a very brief email to us as the committee to say, yeah, we've clocked it, and these are the reasons why. Didn't really get a chance because it wasn't in the presentations today to bring up that minute level of detail. Sorry.
Councillor Jackie's got her hands up. She's still with us, so perhaps she wants to answer that now.
Yeah, I might be able to help, Gary. I mean, please do still put that on the recommendation if you feel strongly about that. But the 150% is only the one charge is going up like that. If you look at the other ones, they're going up less than the rate of inflation. And in fact, anything over 4 hours, so that long stay, there is no increase at all. And there's no increase on the permits either. We felt that we did need to address this and the need to understand who could afford it or not. And the way we looked at it is that those people who were staying longer, so the over 4 hours, were more likely those people who were working in those communities, working in those town centres. So we haven't increased that cost. And again, we haven't increased that cost if you've got a permit, an annual permit for car parking either. So we did look at it in the round. We did do some research about it, and it was something that we thought would be problematic with communities, but felt this was the fairest way that we could do it. Plus, of course, we still have the up to 1 hour in a lot of communities and a lot of town centres where you can park for free as long as it's within an hour. So yes, we did look at that, but I'd be very happy for you to send in your concerns so that we can respond to that in writing as well.
Okay, I mean that does sort of alleviate some of the concerns I had. Thanks, Jackie, in the fact that you have considered it and that you've answered some of the reasons as to why you feel. So I'm not sure I would need to put that any further, but thanks.
And the other thing is it's a bit like the burial services. Nothing has been done since 2019, and because we've got, you know, lots of things have moved on since then, we did think that it was time to assess that and put in that payment or put in that charge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And my second point, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
Was just around some sort of references to shared prosperity funding from two departments now, HTR under their rights of way stuff, and indeed the communities one. I guess I just raising a fear as a committee member, but also as a representative of the third sector, perhaps out there, that Powys seem to be finding money through the shared prosperity fund to support some of its services, and fine, I get some of that, but what I haven't yet seen is anything that enables our wider world to approach those funds. And we have to remember as a council, this isn't money meant for internal expenditure. This is what is the replacement for the whole of Powys under RDP EU funds. So I guess just as a scrutiny committee member, just raising a bit of a concern that haven't yet seen that flip out into the community world for approaches, but already we've had 2 mentions of it internally today.
Okay. Right, I think if no other committee member has any comments and none of our officers or cabinet members have any further comments, I want to thank you all for your input, and we'll end the formal part of the meeting for today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.